Come on, you can do it. There we go. Okay, and we are live. Yeah, you want to pick up from that point? We can do that.
Yeah, that was my interpretation. I want to let you guys know that's a Matthew Finkelstein original.
Okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough, indeed. So, what do you guys want to talk about tonight? Just want to make this a random questions night? Do you want to do this some type of topic? What's on everybody's mind?
I would like to continue talking and monopolizing the conversation. So,
in moderation.
Back up. Everything in moderation. Okay. We were talking about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, with my twin brother, and we were having a very lively discussion about this morning with Susan, and I just did not understand the binding of Isaac. Talked to my dad about it too, and I'll be honest with you. As soon as he starts talking, I stop paying attention. Sorry, he's a wise man, but I am not. So anyway, what was that?
Sorry.
So that was one of the things we talked about today. Joel was talking about how it's necessary to do two things. And this is the core of the tradition. That it's necessary to bind yourself, as Isaac did, when the situation demands that you bind yourself. And this is actually what he says is like the root of tefillin, you know. And then it also requires you to hold the knife, you know, and that to possess the power to do terrible things, but to also refuse to do them. And not just, but to know that if you follow God's law, that you will not be forced to do that. It's an inherent understanding. Abraham knew that he wasn't going to have to kill Isaac. And he told two people on the way there, and he told Isaac himself that he wasn't going to do it. And so my big question is, what is the purpose of this bizarre symbolic performance? That's what I don't understand. Right? If God is a God who does not demand child sacrifice, then why should we enact it as if to appear as though it may be a thing? And how is that not responsible for Shabbatai Zvi later on down the pipe?
Okay. That's a little bit more historical. We can go back into that. The entire point of the binding of Isaac, it's still a test of faith. Abraham could say, yeah, I'm not actually going to do it. How do we know? I can say I'm going to do things all day long, or I'm not going to do things all day long, and I may do or not do them as I see fit. People are very rarely in this world, honest about their real intentions and their motivations, whatever agenda they may have. So to me, it still makes perfect sense. But again, I would say I have a little bit of a bias. Could you elaborate and help me out a little bit how that relates to Shabtai Zvi?
Shabtai Zvi, as I understand it, was killing people on the altar, right?
No, he never killed anybody.
Really?
Said a bunch of outrageous crap, but he was a false messiah. But there's no sacrifice or killing anybody.
And I am misinformed greatly. All right, we can move on then from that particular. Forget about Shabtai Zvi. Forget about him then for a second.
He's a very interesting character in our history. Not a particularly good character. Definitely a bad guy, but not a murderer. Maybe.
A what?
Definitely a charlatan.
I'm perfectly happy to talk about Shabtai Zvi. I'm ready to learn.
Yeah, so during the go ahead.
I did one on Isaac real quick. I'd always looked at it as if as a man who had his tent open to all sides of the world, human sacrifice was kind of a thing. Perhaps it was a lesson for Abraham, as to the lengths that people will go through. He understands that now. And now that, when I say now, but in that part of our story, when he offers the ram instead, I mean, that was his lesson, wasn't it? Or do I have that backwards?
No, that's a good way of looking at it. You have to think, Abraham came out of this Mesopotamian culture where child sacrifice was very much a thing, as it was throughout the ancient Near East. So that's a good point as well. It could be just as much as be a learning process for Abraham as well. No, it's a valid.
The one thing that child sacrifice did give you in the eyes of your community was unquestionable spiritual devotion. If you willingly sacrificed your child, you were then seen as being absolutely in lockstep keeping with there was no greater test of faith, so to speak, than that.
Mhm.
And so whatever testament of faith is required from us is in some ways, I think, explained in this ritual as a substitution for something that would promise as much conviction and necessarily show of conviction, demonstrable, signaled conviction. Okay. And that this is, I think, what is expected of us as Jews and is a stand in, so to speak, for child sacrifice. But not only does nobody need to die, nobody should.
Also a valid insight. I agree very much. What's gross, James?
We have an echo somewhere. Gross is human sacrifice. That devotion, and the whole thing just kind of grossed me out. So I typed gross.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it is a gross concept. And we think about it as there's kind of like this thing in antiquity, as if it's not still around in various forms today. You think about it, like in the Congo, they have these little boys, some of them as young as 4 and 5 years old, being forced to work in the lithium mines. They tend to die very, very young, under hard labor. I think that's a form of child sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
You think of human sacrifice, you think of some Aztec guy with a painted face and an obsidian knife cutting someone's heart out. And while that's definitely an example, there's a lot more examples of it than just that, of course.
Yeah, human trafficking.
But the difference is that, like, that's being done for explicit financial gain. There's one motivation there.
I can't hear you, Matthew.
That's being done for explicit financial gain. There's really only one motivation there. When it comes to that is not child sacrifice, because a sacrifice is something you necessarily do not gain immediate material benefit for. Sacrifice is something that is done in order to gain the allyship of an invisible power and recruit it to help you, and to signal to your community that you're willing to do, things that don't directly benefit you. That's the nature of sacrifice. So I don't think that the word quite fits there. You know what I mean? I don't. I'm a child. Don't get me wrong. I mean, concern for children is very important. Reams of Seal is being honored at a convention in Berkeley, where they're honoring her for the work she does on behalf of indigenous children throughout the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's coming out. That's the beginning of the month of June. And we're talking. Me and Faith Steinberg Meltzer. We're talking about heading out there with flyers. To support, to help provide critical supports for the child soldier programs of Hamas, and you know what I mean, as a way of saying, yeah, it's important to protect the children. What about these children? You seem to be ignoring them. The ones that are being recruited as cannon fodder.
Yep. No, I agree.
But that's not so. So there's child sacrifice, right? Because now you're talking about dying for God and martyrdom.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, in fact, if we're going to take a moment to examine the differences between Islam and Judaism, in Islam, you have Ishmael in the place of Isaac, and Abraham in the Quran absolutely goes through with the swing of his of the knife. He's he's ready to do it, man. He's fully convinced, and at the last moment, there is a divine transposition. They are instantly switched out one for the other. The ram and Ishmael. Ishmael is in the bushes. The ram is then bound in the altar, and that's the miracle. And the knife plunges into the ram, which is there instead. So clearly, in that moment, a very different kind of faith in God is evinced, right? The kind of faith that requires you to be willing to kill your own son and to pray for the miracle that somehow by God's magical transposition magic, that the ram will be just magically transported in his place. That's the kind of faith that is demanded from Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I agree completely.
That tells you all you need to know. But that is child sacrifice. The idea that like children should be put in front of the line of fire to please God.
Mm-hmm. For martyrdom, yeah.
For martyrdom, yeah. No, that is, that's, to be honest with you, that's an angle that I very seldom hear people talk about it as, like, as divine child sacrifice. But what an appalling concept.
Extremely. Well, I think there's this concept that they think they're doing something very devout, very, very pious. Really, if they want to put their convictions to their logical conclusions, don't put your little kid out there. Put yourself out there. Let me shoot you, not your kid.
Sure, of course.
Well, but that's not how it works, unfortunately. Yeah.
I like that idea. I'm playing with it. The idea that this is actually just ritual child sacrifice.
It is.
Yeah, I've never heard it put that way.
It's not new either, and Hamas is hardly the only group to do it. I mean, Iran does it all the time.
Hezbollah invented it, right? Like,
weren't there emperors who would like surround themselves with children? When,
the Ottoman emperors, the sultans, they had an elite warrior order called the Janissaries, and they were all mostly Christian boys that were kidnapped from their parents, and they were raised by the state. They were forcibly converted to Islam, and they became fanatical soldiers of the Sultan.
And let's not forget the Abbasids, who were like basically child soldiers that kept order in the Middle East for the better part of 500 years.
Yep.
And it's done exactly the same way. No, absolutely. Child slave armies, that is the way to hold order together historically.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you're a real bastard.
Yep.
That has legs. A program with legs.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, but the real legs is Torah. The real legs is Torah. The real legs is in having a community that knows how to collectively self-determine, that has layers of engagement with the idea with and individual ideas about morality, and knows how to discuss them, debate, and engage the material. That's the only program that has legs, because we're still here doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what comes to mind right now, you just said that, I think you and I are the only two Jews in here.
You're kidding me.
No. This is normally like a class for Noahides, which are like in Jewish law.
Yeah, no, the Noahide law. Sure, there's seven Noahide commandments, right, for each color of the rainbow.
Yeah, and 7 subsets of law. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what kind of is bizarre about that? One of them is basically like, and don't chop the limbs off of an animal.
Well, you're not supposed to eat flesh torn from a living animal or a limb.
It's weird that that's one of the Noahide laws. That's so specific.
It's very it's very specific. But you know what? It's more common than you'd think, even today in those parts of the world. It's really gross. It's an abhorrent concept, right?
Of course.
That you would rip a leg off a chicken while it's still alive and start eating it. There are places in Africa I've actually seen it done.
That's horrible.
It's really, people don't think anything of it. So it's there for a reason.
It also what Rabbi Moshe Weiner did was when he put the the Everman High law down, it also included the vegetables. So all the laws that apply to Israel, like not to splice a vine in a tree, not to mate certain species together, not to benefit from certain, that applies to all Noahide code as well. That's
although you can eat bacon, right?
We're not. There's no punishment for it. No.
Right. There's no provision against it. You guys are completely you can throw some bacon on there, no problem.
We can't. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's good to be a Noahide.
Yeah.
That's an ongoing discussion, and John is in the end stage process of becoming one of us.
Oh, okay. Different story.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you. Amen.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a little motley crew here of really good people. I don't know why I said motley crew. That conjures up images. I'm not sure why I said that. But yeah. Okay. Okay.
What about this false messiah?
Which
Shabbatai V.
well, which one? Wait,
Yeah.
we get out the unfortunate list.
Oh, the famous one we were discussing earlier. Yeah.
There have been quite a few famous ones.
JC?
Shabtai Tzvi. Yeah, so he lived in, I'm going to use this term very loosely, even though I hate it. He lived in what we would call Ottoman Palestine during the Ottoman Empire. And he was a big Kabbalist. He was very big into Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. And he fell in with a rabbi named Natan of Gaza, back when there was a Jewish community in Gaza. And they basically went around the area and they basically proclaimed and everything, look, I'm the Messiah. You don't have to keep Torah anymore. He actually had people eating forbidden foods. He began a new blessing that you could say, blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe, who allows the forbidden.
Wow.
He basically, he had a massive following, believe it or not, a huge following. As far east as Persia, as far north as well into Europe, across North Africa, he had a huge following, and he triumphantly, with a little procession of followers, and this is kind of the Reader's Digest version, he went to Istanbul, where the seat of the Ottoman Empire was, and to the Sultan, and he said, look, I'm the Messiah, bow before me, it's my kingdom on earth now. The Sultan, as you can probably imagine, was not amused. And so he gave him an ultimatum. You can convert to Islam or I'm going to cut your head off. He and all of his followers that were with him chose to convert to Islam. And they actually represent an Islamic sect within Turkey to this day, who still, like, outwardly they're Muslims, but inwardly they practice some Jewish rituals behind closed doors.
Crypto Jews.
Yeah, they're called the Dunme.
The Dunme. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I thought for sure they were going to end up being called the Khazars.
No. Different people way earlier.
God, the Dunme. I'm like, geez, this guy. Crazy.
He's still very much around. I haven't met any, but I've had a couple email me.
That was an actual prayer he wrote.
Yeah, I understand. Like, this wasn't a guy that was like, three dudes in a van. Like, nobody heard of him. This was like big news. This would have been like, this guy would have had like, God forbid I should make this comparison, like a mega church kind of following. Like, everybody knew who he was. Like, he was a very, very popular, charismatic. He swindled a lot of people. Like, a lot of people believed in him, sadly. So yeah, he was one of the more damaging false messiahs we've had. I mean, they were all damaging to some degree.
Nobody tops Bar Kokhba.
Bar Kokhba did some good and also some bad. He doesn't get a lot of positive press in the rabbinic literature. Very, very militant. Was very, very. He persecuted Jews that wouldn't follow him. He was not a particularly nice character. But he did have the ear of one of the major sages of the time, Rabbi Akiva, one of the major rabbis in history.
Mm.
So,
Who saw the Second Temple fall?
he may have. I'm not sure. I mean, he would have, if he did, he had to have been a very, very small child. Because that happened in 70 and he died in 135. Let me say.
Oh, there's stories that I've heard about Rabbi Akiva watching the temple fall and like conversations. I assumed that he was around for that because of the stories of what things he said when it fell. But interesting. Those might just be folktales.
It could be. It could be he was there. He just would have lived a pretty long life. In the ancient world, people didn't live pretty uncommon, 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
Common. For sure.
So, who are your Who's your list of the most damaging false messiahs?
Well, I mean, the number one would have to be obviously Jesus of Nazareth. For the people watching,
Yeah.
it's going to attract some negative attention. That's okay. I don't think
is the popularity what makes it number one, or was it what the man himself did? What we know of
Good
him.
question.
I don't. So okay. So here's my. You want to get the Gavril Kostanov take on the historical Jesus? I don't have a problem with Jesus, the man, the historical problem. I have a big problem with his fan club.
Right.
We have this thing where we have people who at one point are very, very close to us, Jesus of Nazareth and Paul of Tarsus, and later, dare I say, Muhammad. Even though he wasn't Jewish, he was very close with the Jewish community in places like Medina, and they start religions that eventually, or in the case of Muhammad, very quickly turn on us and do horrendous things to us.
Now I've been told that Rabbi that Peter actually repented later on in his life and did teshuvah, came back to Judaism.
Yeah, I'd have to read up on that. I haven't quite heard that one. I mean, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting.
I've been told that there's a prayer that we say that every day. One of the prayers that was written by him. I didn't know if there was actually any sort of credence to that or not.
I'm gonna have to.
I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was, though. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I'll have to look that up. That's interesting. I doubt there's a whole lot of truth to it, if any, but that's an interesting historical tidbit. I have to look into that. So yeah, I'd say Jesus of Nazareth is probably the worst. Again, not because of the man, because of the fan club.
Right. Well, I mean, conversely, what do you think about evangelical support? It's a double-edged sword, right? Like, but there's some evangelical support for Israel that has been really important to its ongoing survival. I mean, it comes with a host of terrible complications in some cases.
Well, it depends. This is not a monolithic group of people.
Right.
The biggest line that I hear about evangelicals that I have found to be mostly, I'm not going to say completely untrue, but mostly untrue, is that they're all in it to bring about the apocalypse. That's just
I hear that over and over again from liberal Jews.
Yeah,
they beat that drum like it's the only thing that exists, and I have the same intuition. I'm like, that can't be the only reason that they're doing.
I mean, Christians will tell you Christians say it right to my face. They expect JC is gonna convert all the Jews. They're gonna kill the rest. He's gonna kill the rest. I mean, that's what they beat into me all the time. I go to the rooms, I talk with them. They support Israel and the Jews because of JC's gonna get rid of us or convert us.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked quite a bit with the Christian Zionist community. In fact, that's mostly who I speak for when I visit the United States, when I speak before audiences, believe it or not. I would say probably about 30% of them that I've talked to believe that is their primary motivation. Most of them have other reasons. Some of them are in it shamelessly just to get in there so they can try and convert us, evangelize us. Those definitely exist. Those are problematic. The biggest group of evangelical Christians that support Israel, CUFI, Christians United for Israel, they have a non-proselytizing stance, and absolutely no one I've ever met affiliated through that organization is in it trying to bring about the apocalypse. In fact, they're very emphatic that they don't believe they can bring about the apocalypse even if they wanted to.
Oh, that's good, at least, I guess.
And that's led by a man named Pastor John Hagee, which was actually a personal friend of mine.
Oh, okay. And John Hagee is like one of the higher ups in CUFI.
He's the guy who founded it, and he's the head of it.
Right.
And he's a phenomenal man, and I've spent quite a bit of time discussing his theology with him. And the thing is, liberal Jews hate him, and the thing is he's none of the things they accuse him of being. He's not trying to convert us. In fact, and he's gotten into a deep, deep trouble with the evangelical community for teaching.
Yeah.
He doesn't believe that Jews have to believe in Jesus to go to heaven.
Wow.
Which is unusual. This is a right-wing Pentecostal preacher And he doesn't. He said the Jews are the only people that are exempt from that. Gentiles have to believe in Jesus. Jews do not.
He's a dual covenantist, right? Isn't that the technical term for it? Dual
Yes,
covenantist. Yeah.
which is very,
That's
very
interesting because that squares away some of the problems with the promises that are made in what Christians call the Old Testament.
Mhm.
Because to Jews, because the idea is that God's promise is eternal and resolute, and God says as much,
right.
in the Chumash. So that actually squares away nicely enough, given the problematic conceptions that Christians have around heaven and salvation.
Mhm.
It squares nicely enough with those two concepts. Because the thing is that, there are obvious. We could get into this all day. The difference between Judaism and Christianity. There is not as much of a cultural fascination with the afterlife in Judaism.
Right.
Well, the Christian doesn't know better. I know this is going to sound bad, and I could be hated for this. I probably am anyway, but I think we should see it as a blessing. That there's a whole chunk of Christians who aren't, burning you at the stake for
Sure.
trying to get, knocking your knees off or whatever, or running you out of town. Now Jews can own car dealerships here or whatever. And drive BMWs. I'm serious though.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
I think we should feel blessed that we get some support at all, and they're confused on things, and that's okay. They can learn. But in the end, you've got some good people who want to do the right thing. They're better than their religion. I really, I didn't like it either at first. I was all anti anything, JC, for a while. But when I slow down and just look at people and doing the best they can and what they're given, these aren't. I can't. Maybe it's a blessing that we've got some help. We've got friends or people who aren't, at least right now, out to get us. They just think the devil is. Well,
I'm with you.
No, I think that's pragmatic, and we have to find allies in our causes, and we have to we have to be pragmatic about achieving what we need to achieve, and to ally with whoever we need to ally with to get important work done. That doesn't mean there's a prophecy. What is the lion shall lay down with a lamb? But that doesn't mean the lamb is going to be getting any sleep.
Yeah. Of course. Absolutely. And the bottom line that I give people whenever I get into this discussion about whether or not we should accept friendship from the evangelical community is, and really you can't argue with it. You really can't. I could go into all the different reasons why we should not be afraid of these people. I don't need to. At the end of the day, do we have such an overflow of friends that we can afford to be selective?
Yeah.
Right. At least they're upfront about it, right? Like, look, I'm your buddy, I'm your ally. I'll fight for you. I'll die for you. I kill for you. But I'm just letting you know. In the end, my guy's gonna win. You know what I mean? Okay, fair enough. All right.
Pretty much.
Yeah, we kind of have to worry about the fact that we are in a world that favors Jewish hostility, because to favor Jewish hostility is to automatically qualify for political alliances with the entire Middle East, all that mineral and oil wealth. Not so much anymore with Saudi Arabia leading the charge towards normalizing relationships with Israel. But there's still that Arab bloc in the UN. It gets complicated. The fact is that there's one thing that people can agree on, in large groups of bodies, and that is that it's the fault of the Jews. Because if they can agree to that first axiomatic principle about everything being the fault of the Jews, they no longer have to worry about examining their other differences, and it's business as usual. So with that being the situation in which we find ourselves, you are correct in saying that we have to take whatever allies we can, because the other alternative is to really be, I think, effectively beckoning, begging for our own annihilation is what it boils down to. Because at that point, we're left in a world of nothing but antagonistic actors. And it's impossible to survive with that. And of the two traditions, Islam and Christianity, although I think both have a legacy of harm to answer for, I think that I prefer, quite honestly, Christianity. I'll take the Jew that was a hippie over the warlord.
That's exactly what I tell people. You said it perfectly. You paraphrase exactly what I say every time. I said, if I have to have a neighbor who has a role model as a hippie virgin carpenter as opposed to a mass murdering warlord, I'm going to take the carpenter every time. You know.
Exactly. And I got to tell you, it's not like Jews were eager to get into the carpentry trade after that. No, sir. All of us became doctors and lawyers. It was desk jobs from then on. We saw what they did to the hardworking Jew. We were done with that.
Yeah. Pretty much. You know, and don't get me wrong, there are wonderful Muslims too. In fact, a picture I just shared on my Twitter, and one of the ladies I work with at the Curia is a Muslim Zionist. So they definitely exist, but they're in such small numbers as to be statistically irrelevant, unfortunately.
That is correct. You know, the other thing that we touched on here was the idea of the car dealerships. Who was talking about car dealerships earlier?
James was making a joke about that just a few seconds
Yeah,
ago.
you go hockey team, whatever. You can succeed here. There's
there's a danger in that. There's a danger in that. I want to identify something. Okay, the thing is like Jews have gone through periods after the Dark Ages in Europe and all over the Middle East too, like through Dimitude, where like the laws of Dimitude relax, and then the laws of Dimitude were stringent, and then they relax and then were stringent, and then the same thing is true in Europe. Like you just kind of never knew when the other shoe was going to drop, and Jewish wealth was always something that at one point was normalized, Jewish accomplishment, because Jews would create stores of value. But in Europe, they weren't allowed to buy land. There was no safe place in either Europe or the Middle East that a Jew could store value. Ultimately, it would just be, it was something that was in every culture, something that at some point or other was up for grabs. And not only that, if you let your neighbor grab it first, you were less likely to be the victor in the war for the borders. Okay, so there's a lot of, keeping up with the Joneses means attacking the Jews, right? That's just kind of the law of the land. All this is to say that there is now a store of value for Jews, okay? And it's called Israel. And it's a place where Jewish accomplishment can be built upon in a way that lends it historical legacy and permanence. And this is why the world is very afraid of Israel, because it remembers, all these people remember the bad turns they have done Jews in their homeland. And they worry that that now the Jews have agency, that Jews will never forgive them for what they have done, And that is certainly true in the case of Nazi war criminals. Well, who else is on our list? You see what I'm saying? But I think the world, if they're going to lose a little sleep over a Jewish state, that doesn't bother my conscience. You know what I'm saying?
Better they lose sleep than we lose ourselves.
Absolutely.
I was just saying that this is one place where the Jewish people were able to do well, and they did it alongside a lot of Christian folks, made a lot of friends with Christian folks, died beside them in wars.
I agree. But let's not forget about Beitar, okay? What happened with Zev Jabotinsky in Beitar? They were marching in Poland when, before the Nazis invaded. They were showing when they were marching with their Stars of David and their full regalia in the armies before the Nazis invaded, to show that kind of soldier. And they had fought in battles before with Polish military. The fact of the matter is that historically, none of that is a guarantor, and we shouldn't lose sight of the reality of anti-Semitism. And in fact, the sleepy dreaminess that comes over Jews in these moments of, look, we made it. That is, to me, the number one indicator that we're about to get boned. Call me paranoid.
Right. No, you're right. In a way, you're right. When we had Obama in charge, we kind of had someone they hate. Obama was just a disgusting human being, an anti-Semite. to the bone. But now with Trump, I even at temple where I go to, I see it. People they worship him. I mean, there's a guy that walks around with a Trump yarmulke talking about he's the Mashiach. I mean, it's just like, you got to be careful about that because he's a business guy. He'll make a deal. Trump's the type of guy that sell half of Israel if it meant peace, You know what I mean? With Obama, at least you know who they hate. You know what I'm saying, Matthew? You get what I'm going with that?
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I mean, I think Obama and Kerry and they were just deeply confused about how to build legacy in the Middle East. And I mean, the situation that we're looking at right now is so stupid. Like with Iran, it's so dumb. They were like, here, Iran, go ahead and wreak havoc and just you can just begin this lovely little foreign adventurism, and we'll open up funding so that you can pursue all these proxies. No, thank you. I would rather we just be bombing 1 million Damonas from here on out. You know what I mean? Than have to deal with. But at the same time, you have to admit, like in some ways, it was like the perfect like setup for this wonderful situation that we're in now, where it's like what the Saudis are opening up trade with Israel and leading this like this Gulf-led alliance where it's like where they're normalizing relationships with Israel. They're cutting off aid to the Palestinians in Gaza, which is for their outrageous behavior. And I mean, basically, the only thing that these ultra leftists are left with is salt. They're like, oh my gosh, look at these poor people that are suffering in Palestine, and also we should be backing Iran. That's all they're left with, and it's just such an empty legacy. There's no future there, right? So I thank Obama in some ways. Like at this point, I'm like, wow, you actually made a situation where peace is imaginable, So
in a weird way.
Yeah, in a weird way, absolutely. But you know what? I don't know. I think hating Obama is like it's I think that's a step too far. I don't hate Obama. I think a lot of scary things happen, and I'm angry, but I don't hate him. I think that I think that we should probably talk about that because like I really hate. I loved some of Obama's policies for America, and I think that some of his own policies, his foreign policy was awful. That's all I have to say.
It was a clown act.
Yeah, with the AMA and a few other things, he's moving us. Was moving us in some of the right directions. I mean, I think he was an appeaser for the bank, but I think that Trump is worse. By far in terms of just like allowing this late stage capitalist feeding frenzy to continue, right? Like, I mean, I think Obama actually was pulling the brakes a little bit on that, but not very much, but all that he could without being assassinated. So.
What
was that?
What he did when he with his bathroom policy, where all public schools, including elementary schools, had to allow boys to shower or change with girls or sleep over on field trips if they identified as another gender.
That has to be an exaggeration.
That's not an exaggeration. The order, the justice came right out. You can read it.
What it was is he ordered funding be cut to schools that wouldn't implement it.
And they would face and possible prosecution from the Justice Department. And
Trump reversed it pretty much immediately when he got into office.
But that just told me enough about the man right there, and his husband. I'm glad we're done with them. I'm glad we're done with them.
Yeah,
Get it out.
I'll ditto that, man.
No more white guilt.
I don't know how you can like the MAA. I mean,
I'm going to piss off everybody equally. I hate all U.S. presidents.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, they're all
absolutely despise them. Especially.
Come on, what about Carter? Don't you have a soft spot for him?
Oh no, I wish we never would have invented that tumor shrinking medication.
He should have stayed a peanut farmer. That's my opinion on him.
Yeah. And that swings. But I don't like the left winger. I don't like Obama. This really pisses people off. I despise Reagan. Absolutely. I would buy a plane ticket just to spit on his grave.
Right. Guys, wait, I think part of the reason that I really just feel strongly about this wave of of Obama hatred is, I think that like it's that I think that American Jews are more and more being alienated from Israel right now, and 80% of American Jews are Democrats, right? And there's a reason for that. It's because historically, the way that Jews have stayed alive in the countries that they have been that have hosted them is by building large coalitions of disenfranchised peoples and organizing. Okay, that's kind of who we are, what we do. So we are and frankly, when nationalist movements rear their heads, we are always the first people in their line of sight. And what I think we're seeing now in this country is the same historical pattern playing out. As soon as the nationalists rise to power, the Jews are used as human shields for the rest of the coalition of minorities they put together. Suddenly, they're the ones that are being pushed into the firing line by the other struggling groups.
A lot of bigots felt suppressed. It's just now that the white dudes there, they feel that now they no longer have to look both ways before telling an N-word joke. You know what I mean? That's what it is. You know, I think I don't understand the rise in it either. Totally freaking dumbfounded lately. It's just how much it's those old cartoons like on the pamphlets they used to hand, or I guess still hand out. These little drawings and stuff with the clown nose. Are you serious? I mean, I'm dumbfoundedly shocked. It's whatever.
Well, the big secret that the aspect of white nationalism on the rise in America that no one wants to talk about, the aspect of it that no one wants to talk about, it's not new, and in my opinion, it's not growing. It's not growing. I think this has remained static. I honestly do.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong about that. And I would like to, if I may, interrupt you, please, here, Gav. Just to interject.
I'd really like to finish first.
Okay, all right. But let me just plant the flag there and return to that. But go ahead.
Sure. I think people have become more open about it. I think we're seeing it more, and I think they're more vocal about it. I think that there's a certain climate where they feel they can kind of, and I hate to make this comparison too, come out of the closet with it without being too scorned. And that in and of itself is pretty scary if you think about it. But I don't think there's been a huge surge in the numbers of people that identify as white nationalists. I think that any growth has been fairly negligible. I think it's just something that's more open about.
Well, there's just two things I have to say to that. I'm not sure what the FBI statistics have to say. This is the first thing about actual membership in the KKK. Although my intuition tells me those numbers are on the rise for what it's worth. But where the numbers are getting really solid is in quantifying hate speech online and tracking it to certain events. This is what my twin brother has been doing with his institution called the NCRI. And what I can tell you is that the way that they've done this, they've used technology called Word2Vec, which establishes the vectors through in the language that is used to attack individual peoples. Okay, and what they have found is the level of hate speech for all other struggling minorities in the U.S. has stayed static. It spikes at times like in the Charlottesville riots. It spiked around that point, but then it goes back to its static level. Since the election, the amount of references towards Jews in general has skyrocketed on every single platform. Okay, this is very alarming data, and this is about to be released to the public at large in short order. And when it does, you guys are going to see like massive, reactions in the press and the media when people start realizing what's happening here. Okay, now, this is privy information, and I'm gonna, the details to be published shortly, but it's unquestionably to me like the amount of actual hate is definitely on the rise in the country, and part of the problem is you have guys like Trump saying that. He's not saying this explicitly, but he's certainly like in every other way. He's essentially what's called a crypto-fascist. This doesn't mean he's actually a fascist. It means he's a populist. He uses some of these fascist memes, right? The idea is that like he's like, oh, we got to keep these Mexicans away. They're bad people. They're just like Palestinians. They're nothing like Palestinians. We have to, it's basically like white nationalism, and you have guys like Richard Spencer that define that essentially as white Zionism. Okay, and what you have with Netanyahu and his affection for this man is an endorsement of what amounts to race politics, and this is never what Judaism's been about. It's always been about understanding that you were a stranger in a strange land, that you have to hold a place for the stranger in your midst. You know, you have to provide for them and make sure that they feel welcome up to a certain point. No one's saying that we should open up our borders and just give all of North Africa and the Middle East a big hug. But, I mean, so I know I'm arriving at a point at some point here. My point is that, like, this is a very dangerous conflation of Zionism and white national politics. And this is why it's been really hard for liberal Jews to support Israel in this current moment, mostly because the optics are all fucked up. When we start saying we hate Obama, it becomes almost like, dude, that's at that point you are just basically it's like happy birthday to all the biases for the left.
Well, I hated Obama.
Yeah.
So it's not a thing about Trump. It has nothing to do with it.
I try not to hate Trump or Obama. Okay, there are things they do that I hate, but I really try not to hate both of them. It's just a bad look, guys. It's just a bad look for us. You know?
Well, I don't know if I feel comfortable placing very much blame on Netanyahu. I mean, he's distanced himself from American white nationalists before. And in fact, there was a recent statement he released just last month about it. I mean, he's definitely a friend of Trump. Like, he and Trump were friends before Trump became president.
That's true.
They're close personal friends outside of politics. So I don't think Netanyahu is endorsing American Nazis or white nationalists by not. I mean, he's very, very thankful to Trump for some of the things he's done, as he well should be, quite frankly. As much as I don't like Trump either, he's delivered on campaign promises that the last 4 previous presidents failed to deliver on. So,
I mean, that's true. It's true that he's doing those things. Like I said, I'm baffled. I'm finding myself as like a deeply, someone who's deeply opposed to Trump all throughout this thing. I'm finding myself as a Zionist and a progressive in a very difficult position. I have to look at what has happened in the Middle East in regards to the peace process, so to speak, and I feel like this is absolutely the right thing to be doing every way down the line, creating coalitions between the Sunnis and Jews against Iran. And my feeling is that when Iran is finally out of the way, once the Rial is done tumbling to the ground, that power vacuum will be filled by who do you think? Probably Turkey at this rate. But
Turkey's in a civilizational death spin, and so is Iran, by the way. It's very, very interesting. What's happening inside countries like Turkey and Iran is not being reported very widely. But it's not inconceivable to me that Turkey may cease to be an effective power within the next 50 years. They have an appallingly low birth rate. So
really?
Yeah. Iran, if I could compare this to the Soviet Union, my parents were both from the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, and everything opened up to the foreign media in 1991, it was a shock to the Western world that there were actually very few communists in the Soviet Union. There was just a handful of people in the government. Most of the people were communists, if anything, out of convenience, because it's how you got a job. It's how you got into a good school. It's how you accomplished anything in that particularly hellish society, is you had to join the Communist Party. But there was very, very little societal conviction associated with it. It's very much the same in Iran. Iran is this Islamist theocracy. They did a poll 3 years ago. You know how many Iranians attend mosque? Less than 2%.
Whoa.
They're very, very, very pro-modern, pro-modernity. They're very, very pro-Western. They're not a fan of their government. They're very, let me put it this way, kind of like the American liberal patriot today. They may not like their government under Trump, but they love their country. Iranians are fiercely patriotic, but they don't love the Iran at all.
It's a shame more people don't know that.
Yeah, and it's much the same inside Turkey as well, believe it or not. Most Turks are not.
That's a flame that could spark easy.
Yeah,
Most given weapon.
Yeah, most Turks don't want their country to be turned into a Sharia hellhole either. But I mean, it's unfortunately the right guy is retained and is maintaining power, and he's consolidating power by making slow, gradual changes to the Turkish constitution. That's how Erdogan keeps staying in. It's interesting. It's not. It's definitely not the people we have a problem with in Iran. It's the government.
But attendance in the Middle East for all mosques and for overall is going down. You know, I understand, like, dramatically.
Yeah. As a general rule, Islamic civilization is kind of dying in a way. It has appallingly low birth rates. You know, an Iranian woman who's 30 today probably grew up in a house with 7 other siblings. She may have one child herself. They're not very, you know, it's a problem that the leaders of Iran have addressed publicly. It never makes it into the Western news, but it makes it, you know, they talk about it on the news here, and in Al Jazeera they've talked about it, Al Manar as well. And that's what kind of makes Islamic radicalism so dangerous, is that these people realize that they're on borrowed time. As a civilization, they've failed their clash with modernity. And there's 2 ways they can go, and a certain subsect have decided to take this to be the end times, and so they're acting accordingly. And then a large majority would like to move forward, but obviously they're under the boot of the worst people in these societies. That's the problem.
Very interesting, because, like, if you know, and subconsciously, population like plays a huge factor in the way that societies, you know, create values, right? Like, so I just kind of wonder, like, what is the future of suicide bombing going to be when the birth rate is as low as it is, right? Like, it'll be kind of, I think, like, almost you're assured some kind of like a pendulum swing in terms of Islamic values in the opposite direction. If the birth rates are really that low, that's like basically the end of jihad.
Yeah.
You know, your life starts becoming precious.
Right.
You know, they all become a bunch of Sufis, and there's peace in the Middle East. Bam.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that in the Middle East, I think eventually it's going to stabilize and be very good. Where I worry is in parts of Africa, and I hate to say as well, parts of Europe. Because the population, you talk to the average Syrian in Belgium, they're much more religious and they're much more fanatical in their outlook than the average Syrian from Syria. Much more. They have this kind of the siege mindset of living in a kafir society, a non-Muslim society.
Right.
I think everyone is out to get them, and it's a really interesting dynamic that the most religious Muslims don't live in Muslim lands anymore.
That is fascinating. That's a very strange inversion.
It is. It's a very.
But you're right though about the whole shtetl effect, so to speak. I don't know. That's probably not the right word to use for them. But you know, when they start ghettoizing, like. And the rule of law is no longer applied there. I think in like 2015 in Germany, like 30,000 little girls lost their clitorises. You know, that's in Germany. That is crazy. That is just crazy.
It still happens here. Nowhere near in that number, but that's mostly with the Bedouin.
Oh yeah, I had a friend complaining about the Bedouin today. I'm not complaining about them, just complaining about Israel's treatment of the Bedouin. And I remember, like, you know, talking to you about this like a while ago, and like just how difficult it is, first of all, to get Bedouins to understand the concept of building permanent structures, much less how to do that in a way that lends, you know, that follows code. You know what I'm saying? It's just not a part of their cultural values. And so, like, what could Israel be doing better to win? Because Israel needs allies. It needs Bedouin. It needs Druze. You know what I mean? Like, it needs those people on its side.
Sure, absolutely. I just shared on Twitter a picture of the Bedouin reconnaissance unit being sworn in on the Quran in the IDF. It's kind of interesting picture. But no, the Bedouin, it's very, very complicated. It's very complicated because they don't fit neatly into a category. They're kind of neither here nor there. Yeah, they're Arabs, but they're not nationalistic at all. Most of them have no interest. Most of them don't identify as Israeli or Palestinian either way, to be honest with you. They just kind of want to stick to their thousands-year-old lifestyle and be left alone. And the problem with that is that, especially in the south, there's basically two groups of Bedouin in Israel. There's the Negev Bedouin in the south of the country, and then there's the much smaller group, which is called the Galilee Bedouin in the north. And the ones in the north are actually much more patriotic. They tend to serve in the army at higher rates than the ones in the Negev.
Well, yeah, dude. The Galilee is plush. Life is pretty good. It's worth defending.
Very much so. And the problem is that these people, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and you had the mandate system, all of a sudden borders popped up where there never used to be any. And so they kind of became trapped in places where a Bedouin tribe might wander from the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia 100 years ago, and months later find themselves in Libya in North Africa from wandering, just nomadically wandering. Well, that all stopped, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and they became stuck in these places permanently. So they stopped being nomadic, and they kind of just set up. Up until the late 70s, most of the Bedouin in Israel were still living in tents. They were not living in permanent structures. And now they live, especially in the Negev, like these little semi-permanent shanty towns, right. Many of them that do not have running water or electricity, and they're happy. Like that's how they want to live.
Yeah, exactly.
And the state comes and just try, like, hey, look, we'll build you permanent housing. We'll build you this. You're technically on state lands, and we're planning to build an expansion to an Air Force base here. Will you please move here? And they say no. They want no part of it. They want no part of modern housing or integration, which would normally be fine, but you can't exactly have groups of people setting up and posting up wherever they want. When the state has plans to land that legally they're entitled to.
It's hugely problematic because, it ends up being used as a billy club by which to prove the moral failure of the Jewish state. Just one more example. It's like you're stealing land from the Bedouin, people who don't have a concept of land ownership and are just right.
And you'll have Daniel Pipes actually wrote a really good article refuting this. You'll have groups that will refer to the Bedouin as indigenous. And I was like, well, no, they're nomadic.
They're nomadic. They're not indigenous to anywhere. That is nonsense. But then you have a contrary argument about the the Roma, and they are indigenous to, and they've just become wanderers by virtue of an unfortunate condition. I think the Bedouin are quite the same. I think they have like a much longer history, and it's not clear where they're from.
No, I mean, if you wanted to make the case that the Bedouin are indigenous, that's fine, but they're indigenous to where every other Arab is indigenous to, which is the Hijaz in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
But this is not a claim the Bedouins themselves make. The Bedouins do not claim to be indigenous. To be honest with you, aside from a few vocal propagandists, most Palestinians do not claim to be indigenous. They base their claims to the land on jihad, on divine right. We conquered this. It's ours forever. It's Dar al-Islam. It's the house of Islam.
That's right.
Many of them are actually quite upfront with the fact that they come from tribes that originate elsewhere. Including
there's a small part of their population. It's not like the majority at all, but a small part of the population that share similar genetic backgrounds to Jews because, of course, they did the colonial thing. Right.
It's a much smaller group of people than people realize. It's certainly not.
I wonder with genetic testing about the future of Judaism. There are so many people who are, genetically Jewish or else are descended from Jews. I kind of wonder if there will be a program for such people to follow that's like a little easier for conversion.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of bearing on anything, to be honest with you, because you can indicate a possible Jewish origin for someone but it's never definitive. I mean, there are other groups that we match almost identical with as well. I mean,
Kurds.
10% of Italy has quote unquote Jewish genes. So it's hard to say.
I've always heard the reason for that was because Jews and Italians were just way more willing to get it on than the rest of Europe. But they were Mediterranean. They kind of understood. It's like, okay, yeah, you know what? We're screwing and we're in business, and that's how life works.
Well, I mean, in the Roman Empire, Jews were, not everything was doom and gloom for Jews in Rome. It really wasn't. I mean, it's Jews that lived in Rome and the actual city itself did very well. Were very, very integrated. And the theory now with genetic testing is that the Ashkenazi community is basically founded on basically Jewish merchant men and slaves were brought from Judea, where they converted and married local Italian Roman women. And that's where we get like this admixture split from, this bottleneck. And that's the prevailing theory at this point. So
very interesting. Do you guys think that Obama's policies towards Israel were driven from a pathological, why do you think Obama had such negative feelings about Israel? Do you think he had longstanding an issue with Israel's existence, for instance?
I have no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. I that's why I don't give him much slack. I don't think it was incompetence. I think it was honest malice.
All right, let's hear it, guys. Anyone agree with the rabbi?
Yeah, I agree with him. He was an anti-Semite.
I agree too.
I think he was definitely an anti-Zionist, that type of anti-Semite. Yeah, I think he did.
Right.
Publicly, he was soft on it. He didn't speak very. But you have to look at all the people he surrounded himself with and what all of his influences were. Bill Ayers, he went to that nutcase Jeremiah Wright Church, which is rabid anti-Semitic.
Right.
He is very, very good friends with Rashid Khalidi, who was a former lawyer for the PLO, spokesman for the PLO, or things like that. So, I mean, I think all the evidence is there. If you look at his ideological underpinnings, this kind of quasi-Marxist ideology, it's very kind of hard to pin down Obama's actual foundations. He doesn't really have any, but they're all in these same sort of groups that, especially today, we associate with anti-Zionism. Yeah.
He definitely was associated with Louis Farrakhan.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are, and there are some people for whom that means a lot more than others.
Yeah.
I think being in the same room as Louis Farrakhan is just probably not a whole lot different than being in the same room as the senator from Louisiana.
Well, he had his there's that.
Yeah, but there's there's levels there. There's levels when you're sitting through there's Tamika Mallory committed. Oh, by the way, guys, I was wondering if anyone could confirm this rumor about Tamika Mallory. As a brief aside, I was told that Al Sharpton gave a speech at Freddy's Fabrics in New York. And during the speech, one of the protesters, I think it was against high rents or something. But basically, it's Jews control stuff. Let's go outside of their businesses and protest. They burned down the fabric store and 2 employees died. Well, Tamika Mallory's parents were known to have been at that fire, and Tamika Mallory's thought to have been at that fire. And I'm wondering if you guys have heard anything about her presence there. Because she's been burning down the House of Peace for Jews and blacks ever since. That's the punchline.
I have no idea. I didn't even know who Tamika Mallory was 2 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Probably best not to feed it unless you want it to grow.
No, I really don't. That's why I'm so sick and tired of opening my Facebook feed. I was like, oh, there's Linda's picture. Why is this hook-nosed bitch in my feed again? Sorry, that was not the best thing to say, but I don't really care.
I'll be honest with you. If anyone can get away with the hook-nosed thing, that's us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, God, just why is this vile snake of a woman in my face at 7 a.m. every morning? Why are we posting? I understand it's good to raise awareness, but at a certain point, it's let her die already. Stop feeding the
Right.
know.
Right. I mean, like they are such. It's weird. It's like, I think that the women's march has really split. Has really caused a massive divide in the left, and it's just become like, Linda was tweeting about this a few days ago. She was like, this is a very divisive moment for us. We have to stand together, and it's like, well, you kind of bought that on yourself. And I think it's becoming like more and more marginal. And in some ways, I'm really thankful that we kind of have this opportunity to get out the poison, because quite frankly, the way that things have dissolved on the left, the total lack of organization, the deference to anti-Semitism, the defaulting to anti-Semitism, I think that this speaks to a program that doesn't have any vision. And I think it's going to peter out before the November elections. And I think that we're going to see a lot of Republican victories, frankly. I think we're going to be surprised.
It's hard to say. My thing with the left, which I really don't consider myself a part of, just kind of an outside observation, is, I mean, think of the hills some of these people are picking to die on. I mean, I understand that there's a legitimate issue. I understand that there's concerns or whatever, but really, when your rallying cry is Apu from The Simpsons, being not being voiced by an Indian guy, or when your rallying cry is, oh, there's a girl on Twitter who has a picture of her doing yoga in dreadlocks and she's white, that's not cool. When that's like your main focus, these very, very marginal tangential issues that don't have a very, very wide societal impact, you're not going to gather that much of a following.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing is that like the kind of rhetorical creep that's coming out of the colleges is definitely been just political poison. When I mean the political creep coming out of the rhetorical creep, I mean like intersectionality and enforced intersectionality is political poison for the masses. They can't digest it. When they platform those kinds of voices, people feel, I think, repulsed by the idea that their speech is going to be so massively constrained. What we saw in Canada with the 72 pronouns enforced by law. My brother's at Princeton, and he was telling me they have 69 sensitivity training agents full-time on campus. And that's a lot of people to have on staff and employed full-time just to control people's language. And they form tribunals to decide whether or not the accidental brush you had against some girl was rape. I'm not saying they don't do good work. I don't doubt they do, but they do a lot of bad work. And so this is not palatable to the public, is my point. It's not a political platform that's effective, and it's repulsed more people than it has attracted to them. So I think that what's happened is they come from the universities, they've established these really refined, way too articulate, curated cultures that they're trying to impose in the rest of the world. It's not going to work as a political platform, but I'll tell you where it is going to work. Okay. It's going to work in the halls of power. It's going to work in businesses at elite levels. It will have a way of, it is a rhetorical creep. It is not a political movement. And because what happens is people that learn the language of intersectionality, they can know how to communicate on the same level as other people who know the language. When they share the language, right, they then condemn people who stray outside of it. And this is how it's able to effectively master the linguistic territory wherever it goes. So this is why it's really good at like taking over like business ethics considerations in the workplace, and this is why like it's good at taking over the Progressive Caucus in the state of California. Okay, and the bizarre thing is there are actually some important contributions from intersectional thinking, but it's gone way off the rails. And I think that we have to rein in some of that language. And we not only that, we have to build bulwarks of resistance on some level to those in our institutions, or else those institutions are going to fail from the same kind of crazy, pithy considerations of the 72 pronouns that these people insist on bringing in that benefit only themselves and nobody else.
Yeah. I don't know. It looks like question for you, Matthew.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just curious what you think. You're Jewish, I take it, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. We can, yeah, I guess. Okay, so what do you think of Noahides, or what do you know of them? Or how does it? How do they strike you? How does the
Let me tell you about my history. Let me tell you about history with Noahide. So first of all, I want to say my dad was a rabbi, and he was very, very fond of Bnei Noach, and we had like a whole segment in our shul in Tyler, Texas, where he constantly was going through conversion classes. And I'm very open. He was a rabbi in Barbados, and when black congregants were coming into the white synagogue, right, he was welcoming them, and his wealthy Bayesian, which is basically another word for Barbadian, they call him Bayesian, believe it or not. Bayesian, his wealthy Bayesian clientele, who had been at the oldest synagogue in the Caribbean, basically said, "Hey, you can't be taking these folks in." And my dad was like, "Well, you're wrong about that." And they're like, "Well, you're fired." So, I mean, I just want to say that, like, having a principled stand about Bnei Noach and conversions, very important to me. And in fact, I think that in many ways, the convert has taken on a bigger moral duty than the Jew. Well, it's the same moral duty, but the convert wasn't required to do it. And so in so doing that, that is a righteousness that can never be granted to Jews. And I think for me, there's a place of honor and of tremendous import for converts, just tremendous. And I do believe that to me, like the most Jewish people I've ever met have been converts, to be honest with you. And as for
Cool.
Bnei Noach, my dad worked with the Bnei Noach when he was in Texas. There was a whole bunch of them in Houston. And I'll let slip here that Vendel Jones was one of the people that my father worked with for quite a while, and he had a whole Bnei Noach movement in Dallas that was really big for a while, until I think that they ran into some very tricky financial situations, to put it politely.
I know Vendel Jones.
Yeah. My dad worked with him for a long time, and when I was like 15, 16, I used to come to our synagogue and stuff like that. And so, like, I knew a lot of people that were affiliated with that movement. And my dad went to Israel with him, actually got some of the Ketoret, which is crazy. We just found it recently, along with all the papers authenticating it. We've got to figure out what we're going to do with it. It's kind of weird being in possession of the Ketoret. I'm a Levite, so it's like it's kind of a strange space. And I'm working with the Princeton Rebbe, trying to determine what to do with that stuff. So that's new. Since my father got ill, we've been trying to get the Ketoret from him for years. And he just refused to give it up. Finally, when he was in the hospital and he was ill, he was like, okay, he's a hoarder. You know what I mean? You can't hoard the Ketoret. There's rules. I mean, literally, hoarding the Ketoret is what killed Aaron's sons. Just saying. That thing is only supposed to be for the Shekhinah. And to have a Shekhinah, you need a community. Because the root word is Shchuna. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Oh, now I know what the rainbow means on Mario's hat.
Yeah.
Now I get it. I was like, okay, this guy's an LGBTQ activist with a hammer.
But I like having it there because it's I'm in the minority there. So see, I'm the confused minority that okay, No. Yeah, I'm just curious about your take on it and how it's gone and where it's going. I like how you kind of lumped us in with converts. I have
you got that too, huh, James?
I found appreciation of that. I really do.
Well, there was always a place in the temple for the Bnei Noach. At the temple side, there was always a place for them to worship right along with the community. And I lumped them in with converts because my feeling is if you stay Bnei Noach long enough, it's like at some point you're like, you know what? Let's just. I see Bnei Noach as kind of like a beginning stage for a lot of converts. I mean, I may be wrong about that. They are separate things. You know what I mean? But I'd like to know your take on that, honestly.
Oh, I'm all up in the air. Depends on my mood. Um, I don't like Noahides. I can say that. Very few I can tolerate. Really, I don't like them. I don't like. I'll say that. I wouldn't. I understand when the rabbi calls me or anybody says I'm Noahide. I'll accept it, but I'd rather say B'nai Noach or nothing at all.
Oh, really?
I don't like them. I find a lot of Noahide folks to be pretentious and stuck up.
I wasn't aware there was like a big difference in schools of thought here. So I wasn't even aware there was a distinction. I thought Noahide was B'nai Noach.
There isn't. There isn't. I just like I like saying B'nai Noach better or Ben Noach because at least that's something we can find in the Talmud. You know.
Okay.
Noah, I get that. I don't know about the Noah thing anymore. I don't. I like the idea of a friend of Israel who gets to hang out at a shul like we do now and learn Torah, and that I can study the books, and I have friends who are helping me along with that. We just kind of keep it going, and I really appreciate being a friend to Israel. It's an honor to be a friend to Israel. I would rather be that than anything else. I would rather be just a friend. If you want to do the Ger thing, that's fine too, but that gets you in trouble if you use that word too. And
Yeah.
I find there's something better too. There's just better. I mean, I get Noahide. If we're in the desert, I get it. But in civilization, I really think Judaism or something closer to it is better. I think I think the world could use a little more Jew in it. Honestly, I know it sounds bad, but I think it should Jew up on a few things, and it'd be a lot better. There's great examples in Torah that I think that a very spiritually starved society as the West is could certainly benefit from. That's my personal take. I'm a Torah nut. I'm not a seventh law nut. I'm like written Torah and everything else comes from there. Everything I know about oral Torah comes from my study of the written. I'm kind of shallow on that perspective anyway.
Practically a Karaite. They know this guy.
Well, I can always run into a Jew and says, well, it's oral Torah, and you don't know that, you've never been taught that. I always get that oral Torah bit, but at least if I can speak from the written and then understand how that's applied in a tradition going back all the way, to Abraham or Noah, a lineage that's gone from there. You're Levite. You guys kept the whole thing going in Egypt. Then I can get into the conversation, but the context I can always count on. I can rely on that. You put 3 Jews in a room, 5 opinions, they're all right. It's very confusing. The Talmud's huge. It's for coming into it. So it's better, I think, for us to go simple. I think we get complicated. We kind of remove ourselves from it. I don't know. I don't want to say Karaite because I don't reject any oral law, but it all started from my Chumash, and then I could look at commentary, and then I could see where they got where the commentator was tied in. Then I could go online, and then I could research it. You
go from the source material. You don't study the commentary as it stands alone. You just kind of go, one bit at a time. That makes sense.
Weekly Parsha studies.
That's the way to do it. That's the way it's always been done. You know what I'm saying? It's very seldom that you stray from that, right? Gav, it's like you don't just, go from chapter to chapter. You stay with it 1 week at a time.
Yep.
Yeah.
It opens doors. It opens doors. I can't have anything to do with building the Mishkan, but to sit and watch it be constructed, or you kind of get that. I know that you don't, but in this, how it's presented in the text, it's very specific, and you can see it being put. You can see Moshe doing all the, it's a neat thing. I've always visualized myself in studying for the past 7, 8, 9, 10 years now. Gosh, I think I've been really studying and trying to really keep up with it. I was close by. I'm not Israel, but I'm close by. I always moved where they moved, and they didn't seem to mind me much. They let me come and study some Torah once in a while, and then when I hear about this Ger guy, this non-Jew who just kind of hangs around, He's the border. He's not in Israel. He has no land. He's doing his own thing, but he's close. I like that. I like that better than the Noah thing. Mainly because I get Noahide law, but rather than I don't know. The heritage thing bothers me, but as far as looking forward, I really like the idea of, like you say, converts. The closer you can get a person to a conversion. I can't do it, but if I can help you along the way, here, you got a room for the night if you're, whatever you need,
Very interesting. I'd like to know, just to push a little further here, like, so for you, you're not interested in conversion. You're happy to be B'nai Noach, or would you prefer the word ger? Which one of those? I didn't quite follow that.
I don't like ger.
You don't like ger, so you're happy. You're happy to be B'nai Noach, and your considerations for this. You're not happy to be.
I'm not happy.
No, you're not happy.
No.
So where are you happy then? If you're not going to convert, you're not happy being B'nai Noach.
I know, right? Sucks.
Gosh, you sound like you're miserable no matter where you go. You should really think about converting. It's very Jewish.
Yeah, he's Jewish.
I would like to do more, but only because I would have something to take my kids to.
So
I got nothing. And we're not kosher. And she's not going to go kosher. My wife.
Oh, okay.
It kind of sucks.
Well, Shalom Abayis, dude. Live a long, happy life. You know what I mean? Like, you're not required to convert. And frankly, actually, I have a question, Gab. What is the place of the B'nai Noach in a discussion on Talmud? Are there opinions held? Are there any B'nai Noach that are commented that actually get commentary in the Talmud?
There are non-Jews that get commentary in the Talmud. None of them are B'nai Noach.
Interesting.
Believe it or not, most of the non-Jews that get quoted in the Talmud actually were not that stellar human beings.
But anyone who contributed to the Talmud was a sage, a rabbi. There was never a B'nai Noach who actually got any word in that document.
Well, they're quoted. Well, not a B'nai Noach. A non-Jews that are quoted in it.
Quoted, yeah. I see. In the study of Talmud, where do the opinions of B'nai Noach measure in the room against the opinion of a Jew?
That's dicey. But when it comes to, look, we're obligated in 613 laws. The Noahide is obligated in 7. Obviously, the disparity in the amount of study that's done is going to be pretty big. But as far as their opinion, the human beings are entitled to their opinions about anything. They're not entitled to dictate what Jews do. We're not really entitled to dictate what they do, at least outside the land of Israel. But,
interesting thought. But you can have exceptionally scholarly and knowledgeable B'nai Noach. You could, but and not only that, conceptually, such a B'nai Noach could take it upon himself to try out the commandments and laws that are going in koshers who have lived with the 613 commandments better than most Jews. So conceivably, you could have a B'nai Noach who was far more knowledgeable than most Jews about Talmud and Torah, and who would have stronger authoritative credential in parsing opinions on matters of Talmud.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do like ger, but that gets you in trouble because it's such a complex topic, and I do like the ger term, but I would consider a ger to be basically a friend. You're not gonna be going anywhere near Israel if it didn't have. Really, sincerely, if it didn't have something to do with God. In my opinion, doing business is one thing, but you don't draw near to them because you like, Jewish food or whatever. It's not the Jews don't know how to cook. Nothing, but there's something greater going on here, and we would be like allies. I would rather be a good friend and stand with you against your enemies than to be some other category that is separate from Israel, from Torah, from the temple. You know what I mean? Instead of having another class of people.
Yeah.
You know, that's philosophical. I can go on like, yeah, that's my thing. Hope that helps. Hope that is.
Rabbi Gaff, what are the laws concerning the purchase of land for non-Jews in Israel?
They're not allowed to.
They're not just yeah. Go ahead.
It's just a priori, and it's forbidden. Obviously, we live in a secular state, so it can't. I mean, most land here is not private land anyway that you can buy. Only about 7% of it is private land.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, even though they're only 20% of the citizenry, Arabs own about 50% of private land.
Wow.
Right, of being only 20% of the population. But again, 93% of the land in Israel is state land, which can be leased by anybody, including people who don't even live here or have citizenship here. So there's that.
I was not familiar with that idea, but it makes sense that halakhically it's just not kosher for non-Jews to own land in Israel.
Right.
Wow.
They can't. I mean, there's this kind of, halakha always discuss situations as they relate to living in the land of Israel, how you deal with non-Jews. So it's kind of always assumed that they're going to be there, but you're not allowed to have land, or
Nor could they inherit land if their father was Jewish. In the current set of laws, through the matrilineal, their children could not inherit land if the mother wasn't Jewish.
Correct.
Wow. But that didn't come around until the time of the Maccabees. This idea of matrilineal descent.
That's the secular scholarly view. That's not. I would disagree with that. Actually.
Okay. I'd be very curious to hear your thinking on that.
Sure. The Torah implies, it's never really stated, but it's pretty clearly implied that the children of Israelite mothers are members of the community and the children of Israelite fathers, but non-Israelite mothers are not. There's a mentioning in Exodus. There's another place as well that talks about, don't give your sons to their daughters, that type of thing like that. There's no real concern about the children of Jewish fathers, but that are married to Jewish women. There's no concern whatsoever about the children of Jewish fathers and non-Jewish women. And if you look at the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, which is much later, of course, that he makes basically all of these Jewish men divorce their wives, their foreign wives, and send their children away. Now, obviously, they couldn't have sent those children away if they were considered Jews.
Interesting. That is an interesting opinion. That really actually does put a damper on the secular. If we have texts before that show. Yeah, and then what about Moses marrying a Cushite? Did she convert?
He married a Cushite. There was no conversion. Pre Mount Sinai, there's no such thing as conversion. It was all, the people was basically one giant family.
Right.
Conversion as it was, as we understand it today. I mean, if you were a male and you wanted to become a part of this covenant, obviously there's the issue of a little snip, things like that.
Okay.
Conversion in biblical times would have been basically you adopt our God and our beliefs, and if you're male, snip. Other more ritualistic aspects probably didn't come till later.
Okay. That's fascinating, Gav. I'm going to have to quote you on that. It's interesting. Okay. If you marry a non-Jewish woman, she doesn't convert, you have kids, tough titties. Unless those kids convert, they're not getting the land.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, there's slaves couldn't inherit land either, but if a slave converted, which you're supposed to give a slave the opportunity to convert, not only do you have to free him, but he's also, he can buy land at that point. We haven't had slaves in about 1,500 years, so it's not really relevant.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about this. Is this discussion group? Is it a class for B'nai Noach?
It's a class for anybody.
Okay.
Anybody who's interested. Anybody's welcome. I try to keep the circle small. The very first time we did this, it was a very public thing, and I put the link to get in out there in the bowels of the internet.
And we got raided.
We got raided by all various types of scum.
They like Trump calling people animals. Be careful there.
Yeah, people coming in here with their free Palestine bullshit and stuff like that. And it's like, really, can't even have a class without these people.
They would paste like 2 fast scrolls of just junk propaganda and run.
Yeah,
and they were just a mild annoyance.
Supported us. They put the link to this chat in a Muslim chat room, and that someone said like, these guys are being Islamophobic, go in there and fight them. So like these 2 really nice Muslim guys showed up, and they're like, well, we saw this in a chat where like we were told to come in here and fight you guys because you're being like, we're not even talking about Muslims, dude. We're talking about the Book of Joel and the Bible. Like, this has nothing to do with anything. Like, oh, well, this is we're going to leave now.
But this is being broadcast to the public?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that part of it, I'd ended the live broadcast by that point. But yeah, I mean, the people that are in here now, James and John can attest to what happened.
I see. But only people you invite can join the chat, or anyone could join the chat?
Yeah, no, anyone can join the chat if they're invited. Like if I drop a link in that chat room on Facebook, anybody that's in that chat room can see it and join the chat, and I try to keep it that way as much as possible. If people want to join, they can ask me, and I can add them to that. That's not a problem. I just kind of want to do a very light screening. I don't want a whole lot of strangers, people I don't know, because I'm not trying to go viral and be like, oh, Zionist chat room, blah 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 blah, all that good stuff.
Mm. I understand. Well, that's interesting. I like that. I almost, me, like, I'm like, okay, is this an opportunity to get a platform? Like, could we put this on PZ just so people could listen in, or whatever? But I totally respect what you're doing here. I think this is actually a lot of fun. I'm having a good time. But it's really nice meeting you guys.
Sorry, Gav.
No, good.
We chat every Thursday as well. You're welcome to that. It's called the Orphans of Avraham. Write that down. The Orphans of Avraham. A lot of non-Jewish folk on Facebook, and there's one here on Google Plus. And if you ever want to do this on a Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, we're here every Thursday, and that's a bit more of a parsha study and a little more focused of Torah. And then we get into this too. Don't get me wrong. And then there's the party after, and you're welcome to stop by anytime. And then of course Gav's class or 2 on the weekends. So.
Okay,
Nice.
that's perfect.
Good plug there, James. I don't have to pay you. Nice.
Right.
A nice plug for John there.
Yeah.
You said 8 p.m. Eastern?
Yeah, between 8 and 9 we usually start. It's not. I try not to get that early, but it seems like people have been liking a little earlier.
Well, you say 9 o'clock. We'll be there at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, okay, good. You're my co-pilot, so.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, you're welcome. It's pretty much kind of what we do here in many ways. Everybody's here. And we've had people that have been stopping by. We've been doing this for going on 5 years now, and we'll have people stop by we haven't seen in years, and it's a really interesting bunch of folks, and it's a rare thing on Google Plus to get these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
By the way, guys, I won't be there this Thursday. I'll be at the GARE conference in Waco.
GARE
That's right.
conference. Oh, wow.
Down in West Texas.
Careful, a religious event in Waco. Sorry.
I would like to tell a story about this. My dad, when he was a rabbi in Tyler in East Texas, a woman came in and said that her son is a very big fan of the state of Israel. And she would really like it if the synagogue could donate an Israeli flag. If they had one just kind of laying around, the funeral was in just a couple of days and she didn't have time, didn't know where else to get one. My dad had found an Israeli flag on the side of the road a week before. It was covered in oil stains, but he had it laundered and the stains came out and it was perfectly fine. So he gave it to her. And he went out of his office to say goodbye. His secretary was pale as a ghost. He said that was David Koresh's mother. He was buried with that flag.
Oh,
Yeah, he was a Christian. He was a Christian. Little known fact.
That's right.
Well, if you actually look at the Branch Davidian flag, his particular sect's flag, it has a Magen David on it.
They're Seventh Day Adventists. They're the first Christians to really give it to Rome a stick and say that we believe Seventh Day is Shabbat. And they're split from. That's why they're Davidian. They're divided. They split off from the Seventh Day Adventists. So I mean that's a big thing for Christians to do. In my opinion, it's not a big thing. It's all over Torah, right? It's all over the Bible. But that's what if that tells you anything.
David Koresh,
I never understood that.
he liked us.
They never understood that. Yeah, they didn't want to be like us. They didn't want to worship on the same day. They didn't want to be taken for Jews during the time that Christianity was coming into power in Rome. There was a way to offer distinction from Jewish power.
Yep. It's ironic because Christianity began as a Jewish movement.
Right, of course. Well, it's interesting because they really got the message wrong there. The idea was, it was like, okay, we found the perfect Jew. Let's worship him. And the perfect Jew is what? A dead Jew, right?
Yeah.
But the perfect Jew is a suffering Jew who suffers on behalf of all mankind, right? That's who's at the top of the pyramid here, okay? And all the work is done for you through this Jew. See what I'm saying? And it really is like, it's terrible because the truth is that the Torah says that in some ways we are all like Jesus, not insofar as like we are all Moshiach, but my point is to say that we are all like responsible for modeling our own version of the world. We are morally held to account for our ideas, and we have to that's what we have to cultivate, that individual to take on Torah within the bindings of the tradition. We'll be bound by them and not go too far afield, And that is what they failed to extract from the tradition, is that sense of responsibility for developing agency and moral ideas. And so there's no moral idea. There's only one idea, and that is that you have to surrender to this image. Well, you know what I'm saying? This graven image. Well, they really got it wrong. They really, really got it wrong. Because on the Jewish hierarchy, there is no one at the top of the pyramid. Jews are allergic to pyramids. We are certainly allergic to graven images at the top of them. They could not have gotten it more backwards.
Yep, pretty much so. Very much so.
Well, the peasants learned to read, and I think there's been improvement. Now, particularly past couple hundred years, there's been an improvement, I think. And just the way the world's changing, hearing about the fall of Islam. When you hear about people we got some mega churches here and there, but the attendance of church is nothing what it was in my generation. Or in my youth,
You're not that old, James. Stop it.
20 years ago, a lot more people were attending church. Now it's fewer do.
Yeah, that's why I'm much more scared of the secular left than I am of the alt-right, because I just don't see much left. What I see there is like the dying flames of white nationalism, and you know what I mean? Like, and it's to be replaced by this this bunch of Marxists who essentially don't have a moral center, and their as far as I can tell, their only idea about having a moral center is a default to eradicating the state of Israel as an accomplishment for their moral progression. They believe they actually have to remove this old what is the word I'm looking for? This old standby that is keeping religion alive, because religion is the enemy. So if we can remove any evidence of its legacy in the form of removing this backwards effort to keep the Jewish people alive. They are a relic from a bygone age. We're ready for a neo-Marxist, humanist, environment that just does without this. And to evince that, we have to eradicate any of this vestigial peoplehood of the Jewish people. Karl Marx basically said so himself. He was like, the Jew is the first that will have to disappear because they are the merchant class. And the success of Israel is like an ongoing sort of like, fuck you to their program.
That's awesome. That's wow. Is there not a greater compliment that Karl Marx could have given the Jewish people?
Yeah.
Yeah. He said they were the ultimate essence of the capitalist class. I mean, talk about not an original idea. It's like, hey guys, you're never going to guess who the cultural other is in this new model of thinking. It's the Jew. Surprise!
Yeah. Well, no, basically Karl Marx did is, we want to create this world that replaces Christianity in Europe, but he adopted the same scapegoat.
Well, yeah, because you have to, there's only one historical ride to attach yourself to give momentum to your movement. I think it was, what's his name, with the printing press, the founder of Lutheranism, did the same, of course, Martin Luther, did the same shit. He was particularly a rabid and vile anti-Semite. Everybody knows that if you want to get a movement started and you want it to be popular, you can start by hating Jews.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I don't. I don't. Why? Is it because you're just different, or as an American, I still don't understand it. I'm not familiar with it. I'm familiar with a lot of the old world Confederate bigotry going on. I get that kind of stuff. I don't get why. Why blame the Jews? Why I don't understand. And
why constantly blame the Jews? Why is it?
What do you guys do that's so bad? I mean, really, throughout history, what have you?
I would like to posit something here. Gav, can I field this question, Gav?
Go ahead.
All right, I thank you. So I think this is largely psychological. Okay, so anti-Semitism is a tree in the middle of a field. Let me explain. There are an astounding amount of bike accidents, motorcycle accidents, where a drunk motorcyclist will drive across a field and crash into a tree and die. And this will be the only tree in the middle of a field. Okay. So what is up with this very strange phenomena that only happens to people who are drunk and have kind of lost control of their senses and are, they're experiencing fugu and they don't have a center, right? Well, they find the center. The center is the one object in the middle of the field that is present in their line of sight. It's the tree, and they use it as a point of reference. All of this is to say this is a metaphor. It's a real metaphor. Drunk motorcyclists do kill themselves by trees in the middle of the field, but historically, people that lack their own narrative and lack faith and credence in their own sense of history and connection to the world are essentially that drunk motorcyclist. They feel alone. They don't feel they have any context. They're confused. But there is one thing that precedes them in this field that does have historical legacy. That seems to be where everyone is coming from. Okay? And that is anti-Semitism. It's this idea that, like, if that thing didn't exist, I could reduce it. If Jews didn't exist, I could reduce this whole historical episode to a mythology that I have now replaced. I can now put myself at the center of the story. Okay? But only if that thing doesn't exist. Because that thing's continued existence says that this old program that I'm supposedly coming from, that old program shouldn't matter anymore because I'm here. Okay, and that's Islam, that's Christianity, that's Marxists, that's even freaking like, conspiracy theories who think that Jews are the hyper capitalists, right? That they're the control of the world. Same thing. It's all part of the same problem. It's that it's lost people who feel that they with this desire to steal the rich historical legacy of everything that came from, claim it as their own. And in order to make that theft complete, they have to annihilate any trace of their predecessors. This is, you know what I mean? It's an old sort of psychological archetypal problem.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I've got to drop off here. I'm a little tired.
Ross. Thanks for stopping by.
Extremely interesting conversation tonight.
Oh, Ross, have a good time.
And have a good time at that conference, man.
Oh, I hope it will be good. Thank you. Good night, all.
Take care. Shalom. No, yeah, I agree. I think, I don't know, my ideas on anti-Semitism, I think, are a lot more simplistic. But that's a pretty solid takedown. I think Henry Bernard Levy touches on that on his book a little bit, actually. If you actually get a chance to read it, it's actually pretty good. It's actually a quick read. It's only 120 some pages, I think. But yeah, it's definitely one.
Go ahead, Gab. I'd like to hear your take on the question. Why anti-Semitism?
It's very simple. We're a mirror for the world. We brought this concept of civilization and monotheism into this world, and because we keep on standing up for this belief, this absolute moral standard that we believe in, or at least traditionally that most of us believed in, people feel compelled to compete with you. And when they realize that basically everything that they hold dear is based on things they stole from us, that compels them to eradicate us.
Right. Because they cannot be. This is what I'm saying. They our existence is a
It's an anachronism.
right. Exactly. That's what I was right.
I like that. Wow.
It's a painful anachronism. It's saying, wait, that can't be true. We're the new ones. It's cognitive dissonance.
Well, yeah, that's why it was, the State of Israel came into being in 1948. We did not establish diplomatic relations with the Vatican until, I want to say, the year 2000. It was relatively recently. And a big part, there was this huge fight in the Catholic Church. There still is, over whether or not the Catholic Church should recognize the State of Israel. Because for so many centuries, for almost the entirety of its existence, the Catholic Church held to what we now recognize today as replacement theology. God is done with these people. If they're alive at all, it's so that they can be an example of how wretched and how far from grace you can be. That's it. And that threw a very big theological conundrum, not only into the Christian world, but also into the Islamic world when we regained our sovereignty in 1948. Because according to standard Christian and Islamic theology, that should not have even been possible.
That's right.
Obviously, the Christian reaction to Israel has been a lot less violent, but it's still very there. It's rhetorically, it's very prevalent. And Catholicism, the Eastern churches, mainline left-leaning Protestants, for sure, it's there. It's okay. Why do these people have a state? Why do these people have? You had told a Presbyterian in 1915 that, hey, look, in less than 35 years, these people are going to have their land back. They'd have laughed at you. No, these people rejected our Messiah. Their Messiah. They're landless, rootless, wretched,
Right.
scum of the earth. They'd laugh and they'd throw you out on your head. And so when the State of Israel came into being and survived and thrived and became the forefront of human innovation and progress, it threw a very big theological wrench into their Jew-hating machine.
I never realized that would. I thought that I was just privy to that revelation. It never even occurred to me there would be a debate in the Vatican over that, or that it would shake these religions to the core. Wow. I mean, good. Don't get me wrong, but obviously, I mean, it's no news to me. But yeah, I never thought that it would affect other. I never knew that it affected Christians like that.
Well, it forces them to sit down behind closed doors and with conversations with themselves and actually ask the question, were we wrong? The idea how profound that is when you think you've been right for 2,000 years and then something happens. I mean, look, we're the only group of people. Look, we're not the oldest civilization to be on the same land in human history. Far from it. India and China are actually older civilizations, and they're continually still existing. What sets us apart is we've been exiled twice. We've had our national existence destroyed twice, and we've been dispersed all over the world twice. And our language was made a dead language only for religious study and for prayers for 2,000 years, and we revived it. We made it a spoken language again, and we regained our sovereignty for a third time on the same piece of land thousands of years later. That's unprecedented. There's no other group of people that's even come close to doing that. And I'm not bragging or trying to toot our own horn or pat us on the shoulder. If there's ever a case to be made for some type of divine intervention, it's right there. You cannot, whether or not you agree that the state of Israel came into being, as a result of some supernatural happenings or whatever, whether or not you agree with that, you have to ask the question. You have to address the issue. We're not a normal people in history, and ours is not a normal country. Our story is not like any other story of any other group of people. And the sad part is that we as Jews tell it like a monkey with a crayon.
Yeah, that is a big. You're right about that. Actually, this is the idea that we actually need to build, I think, a secular understanding of what we are that takes into appreciation a Jewish system's logic, like the Buddhists kind of did with mindfulness. We should actually celebrate we should try to extract all of the I don't want to say religion from Judaism, but in a way that we could teach it in public schools. In a way that we could say, there is such a thing as Jewish systems logic. This is how it evolved. It does evolve. Just talk about it at some level as a sociological phenomena. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have the older I get, the more religious leanings I have. I'm not fully secular by any means, but what I was going to say was about having your own story. That strikes me as hugely important. I wanted to relate a quote from Voltaire. This is from my father, who told this to me a long time ago. He says that that Jews are the pimple on the ass of Western civilization, and they just keep on revolving and turning around and around, trying to reach this pimple without ever being able to pop it, and it keeps the entire organism in spin. That's a paraphrase of the quote.
Right.
But I tend to see how Jews are an irritant to the Western world, because essentially we are an Eastern philosophy, right? And the Muslims view us as Western invaders, and in the Western countries we are viewed as Eastern invaders.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Right. Until we go back to Israel, in which case we are colonial Western. So there's a reason for all this weird inverted binary. And that is that we are a people out of place, and we always kind of have been, but we're the only people that can hold down that space, that land bridge, Israel, between Africa and the Middle East and the Mediterranean, because we have the psychological space to be able to create a space where those cultures can flourish and trade at one of those critical trading points in the world. And we have a culture that can sustain in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Jews,
that's what God put us there.
Jews defy convention, and it's not so difficult to imagine that hatred of Jews would also defy convention. I mean, if you think about it, what you've said in the one example you've given, that in the West we were always considered Easterners, and in the East we were always considered Westerners, and now that we're back in the East, we're considered Westerners by even the West.
Right.
That's the history of anti-Semitism. In America, Jews were always scapegoated as communists. In the USSR, we were always scapegoated as capitalists. It's no matter.
Right.
It's the same. My father spent a long time in prison for being a dirty Jewish capitalist. So,
Well,
among other things, and so it's not a new paradigm. It's just a new lens.
man, I gotta say, that's pretty apt. It's a pretty apt description. The Jews always cast as the other, but we're also the only people that what do we base our claim to the land on? We base our claim to the land on the idea that this is the land that God gave us, and that we are strangers in a strange land, and we were promised this land. We are not from here, right? Like that's part of our cultural DNA.
Your king bought that. He bought that on a fair and legal transaction. King David bought that land.
Oh yeah, no question. But that doesn't mean that we're like
everybody else. Everybody else has stolen it. That's still your property by right.
I agree. This is the funny thing. When I make religious arguments for the state of Israel, I always make sure I address them to non-Jews. When I make secular arguments, I always make sure I address them to Jews. That's the part. There's the religious argument, which I don't think necessarily posits that we're strangers in a strange land. But I can come back to that, put a pin in that. There's the indigenous argument, which is an important one for sure. There's the historical argument. There's the legal argument. We have all the arguments in the world that we should be here. For sure. I don't understand how if they were talking about any other group of people in the world, it would not be controversial at all. I don't think any other country on the history of the planet has more legitimacy.
Well, certainly not from a legal standpoint to hear it from Dershowitz.
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
Well, I'm speaking to people who don't get it, don't care, or are against it. What right do they have? And it's just and I use that argument. It's a moral argument, and it really stops a lot of people in their tracks. I mean, they're going to catch on. I'll come up with a better argument later, I know, but they're not expecting that bit of history.
No,
It was a legal, peaceful transaction. Are you not for that? Especially in the Libertarian Party. I've been telling people their king bought that land. Everybody else stole it from them. They have the right to get back what's theirs. And like the Indians, it's like the Miami getting Florida back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, look, we want a parallel to the Native Americans. Jews know a thing or two about treaties as well. We had a binding international treaty with the entire civilized world. It's called the League of Nations Mandate for Palestine of 1922. Every square inch of territory we now control was given to us legally by the entire world and said, here, rebuild your country here, rebuild your homeland here. That treaty has never been altered or abrogated, yet they ignore it all the time. They ignore it all the time. All the time. Every time the UN passes a resolution calling Judea and Samaria or Jerusalem occupied, they're violating Article 80 of the current UN Charter because it preserves all of the mandate agreements. We have every legal right to be in this territory. We had a separate treaty with the Arabs in 1919, the Weizmann-Faisal Agreement, which Emir Faisal was a prince from what is now Saudi Arabia. He was the leader of the Arab revolt against the Ottomans. And the leader of the Zionist movement approached him, and they hammered out this deal that Palestine would be a Jewish country and the rest of the Middle East would be Arab, and that we would cooperate and that they would basically welcome us home. And because he didn't get his way later on, Emir Faisal reneged on his part of it. So Jews understand being screwed by the other co-signers of a treaty too. That's a very big parallel we have with Native Americans. We have every legal right to this land. I don't have to use religion to justify my ties to this land. I have every legal right to be here. If this is a secular court, this is about just a small piece of property, and my neighbor was claiming, oh, he stole this land, I could be like, nope, I have this right here. It's legally mine. And the judge would be like, yep, it's legally his. That's how it should be. But we absolutely, we're victims of treaty diplomacy too, and in some of the worst ways imaginable. But we don't even teach that to ourselves anymore, if we ever did.
What does halakha say about that? If you make a treaty and their side breaks it, are you still obligated in your end of that treaty?
No.
Okay. I wouldn't think so but I want to get that clear.
Agreements are made with, well, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the 3 oaths. You ever heard of that?
No, sir.
So that's a pasuk in the Talmud. The 3 oaths, and it's anti-Zionist religious Jews like Satmar or Neturei Karta use this all the time. It's basically the passage that underpins their entire ideology. So there's this 3 oaths that, we're not allowed to take Israel back by force. When we go back, the nations of the world, we can't rebel against the nations, and the nations cannot persecute us too harshly. And based on this, they say that we cannot have a modern state. Well, that's wrong on so many levels. We did not rebel against the nations. The nations literally came to us in 1922 and in 1920 at the San Remo conference and said, here, have this. That is not in any way a rebellion. They broke their end of the deal, for sure. This theological idea is 3 O's. They persecuted us horrendously. Horrendous. From 1942 to 1945, they slaughtered 1.5 million of our children. Not to say anything of adults. So there's that all, and it says, you don't take Israel back by force. We didn't. We had we had treaties and resolutions, and we took it back. We claimed some of it through self-defense, but not by force. We didn't conquest it, and things like that. So the whole ideology, especially the Orthodox anti-Zionist ideology, falls apart very quick. Very, very quick. There's nothing about our land holdings that's in any way illegitimate.
I'm really glad you brought that up in class yesterday or last week. I'm really glad because I've been looking at it and spreading it. So we forget about that, don't we? We our classroom kind of likes to forget that. I've never heard. I don't think anybody's ever really brought that up before. So thank you.
No problem. No problem.
I'm very concerned about Israel's political polarization of Israel becoming a pet cause for Republicans and becoming increasingly divorced from Democratic Party. I think the Jews are trapped because if they go to the Republican Party, I'm not sure that there's they're just, I don't know if there's any real home for them in this country for the Republican Party. Like it would be a weird shift, it'd be a very uncomfortable space for most Jews given their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the polling, it's really consistent. The vast majority of Jews are pro-choice. I'm not sure where we stand on guns, but I know that we favor most socialist programs. Things like that. So it's there's just no home for us, right? And I don't think a lot of Jews are willing to leave the Democratic. The Democratic Party is like that boiling pot where the frog just doesn't know things are getting hotter for it, and not, you know what I mean? It's
right.
It's getting uncomfortable, man. It's just getting uncomfortable, and it's so when I start talking about Obama here earlier, part of my concern is that I really want to de-escalate some of the rhetoric. I really want to, on our part, on their part. I want to see how,
so insane. Yeah, that's changing too. I mean, What happened to you guys with Bernie Sanders happened to the Republican Party with Ron Paul. And it really shook things to the core, and they got screwed at the convention, just like the Democrats did.
Right.
So I think it's good. I'm all for. Yeah, I'm all for the absolute. I'm all for political destabilization of my country. May God bring it tomorrow. Complete
Amen.
political destabilization. No one needs to be in charge anymore. I'm sorry. We need, because if we don't do it, we're going to gobble up the world, shit on it.
Okay. Look, I think that's a unique point of view.
I'm kind of anarchist.
My concern is Israel. Like, my concern is Israel. In 2020, if there's a Democratic Senate and a Democratic sitting president, I'm just worried about Israel in a Democratic Congress. Like, I don't know what comes next. I don't know how a Democratic president or a Democratic Congress would follow through in the current situation. Would they reopen the trading partnership with Iran? How would that affect things? I mean, no one knows the future, but I find that to be a troublesome prospect. And my instinct is to want to try and de-escalate the situation in the Democratic Party, even if that means having some messy confrontations. Escalating it in the short term and trying to confront people on anti-Semitism, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't really know what to do. I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of looking for some vision here about what to do about the situation, because I just don't think that the existence of the state of Israel should be something that should become a political hockey stick or a hockey puck. And I kind of feel like it has. Well, that's not going to end well for us. Like, this can't be just a right wing or left wing issue.
Right. Well, I don't think it is. I think it's slowly creeping that way, or even quickly creeping that way. But I don't think it's become an entirely partisan issue yet.
Okay.
I think, and to be fair, this is also an issue of geography. I think in your part of the country, it seems much more pronounced than it actually is.
That's true.
Most of
it's toxic. It's so evil here.
Oh, I know it is. Most not insane Democrats that I know, which is most of them, thankfully, are still very pro-Israel. Even the non-Jewish ones, even those that are particularly younger, in other places that are not in California or New York. Like California and New York is the real cesspool of this shit, ironically. Especially California. I don't know how anybody claiming to be Zionist survives in the Bay Area. I really don't. I'd probably be in jail because I punch someone every day.
I'm trying to kind of live in this, and it's been kind of interesting. Guys, check out that meme I just posted. See that?
Yes.
My favorite Turkish ruins. Economy. Quote Gav.
I'll need access to see it soon. Maybe you could put it up on the screen. Maybe you could put it up on the screen here. Everyone can see it.
It's in the group chat.
Yeah, but you need permission to view the picture or whatever you sent.
Oh, okay. I'll try and do it differently.
You screen share.
I'm not good at that.
On the left part of your screen, there's a little TV with an arrow on it. It's a green TV, and it allows you to pick a window open and share it with the class.
Okay, green TV. Oh, I see. Green share. Oh, I see. Okay, good. Hey, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you got a Bible, passage you want to put up, boom,
Yeah. You guys can see that?
Not yet.
Nothing.
No.
Huh. Very strange. All right, I give up. I'm going to take it off of screen sharing. Oh, application window. There we go.
Scroogle strikes again.
Scroogle. Then there's the Jewish version, Kugel.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm scared.
There's one screen.
Bam. That's the meme.
Oh, Oh, Schadenfreude.
I know, right? It's so salty. It's so funny. Yeah. I shared that on the Kurdish Jewish Alliance page. I shared it on my page. They're gonna be like, "What's your beef with the Kurds, the Turks?"
Yeah, you should definitely find some Armenians to share that with. They will hug you.
I will also do that on the Armenian page, the Jewish Armenian Alliance page. I love those pages. It's like, I have so much to learn about that stuff.
I might try to get your permission to include this in my book. Really worthwhile.
It's the common. It's the internet. Yeah. Kill it. Go ahead. All right, guys. Hey, listen, it's been great talking to you. I'm going to go ahead and diffuse for the rest of the evening and just chill out, man, with my girl.
Okay.
It's been a real pleasure. I will most certainly. I am going to give you guys one glorious image of me. My camera on?
Oh, you can turn it off now.
Oh, how do I turn this off? I have to go back to the screen sharing thing. There we go. Is it done?
Yeah.
Shiblin, this is the handsome man you have been talking to.
Very nice.
Nice.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for including me, Gab.
Absolutely. Come back sometime.
I put my pants on just for this discussion. Talk to you guys later.
Good. Very good, Matthew.
Lila.
Take care.
Very good. Very good.
My favorite Turkish ruins their economy. Oh, it's true.
Oof. How you doing over there, Aaron? Awful quiet over there. He's doing something, plotting, scheming. So what's going on, Rabbi? How are we going to end the broadcast? How are we going to wrap this all up? Any sort of message? Any sort of connecting this to the Parsha somehow, some way?
It's entirely audience-driven tonight. You tell me.
Oof. How do we end the broadcast?
Good recap. We're looking for there's a moral argument in history, and then I like that the League of the Nations. We should keep that in mind. I like that. Practical application right there.
The League of Nations was the precursor to the United Nations.
Yeah.
In 1945, the League of Nations became the United Nations. And it went downhill ever since.
We didn't follow through.
A small exclusive club gets stuff done, and it's nice and everything. Then you open it up to the public, and any country can join it. It becomes a crap hole.
I'm glad that it's making people talk. Good, powerful people who've good. Good. This is good. Welcome home.
Yeah, I'm not a big statist myself, James. I like the guy. Matthew seems like a big, sounds like a, good brain on it. How did they say in Yiddish? Good head on your shoulders. There's a saying for it, but whatever. He just seems a little bit too nice guy, good guy. We got to have him back. Good guy.
He's a very good guy.
Yeah. So how do you meet him? How long have you known him?
A while now.
Wow.
Year and a half, 2 years, something like that.
It seemed like you were like old high school buddies or something.
No, I've never met him in person.
Oh no! Oh wow!
No.
You seem so friendly with each other. I thought you were like buddies.
Oh, we are buddies. I just never met him in person. I've talked to him on
okay.
here. I've talked to him on Facebook, that type of thing.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Good. Cool. Yeah, nice guy. Nicest guy.
Know him and his brother.
It's good to meet decent people, man.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
all 7 of them.
Right. Yeah.
Well, no, that's Dennis Prager has a little thing about that. He said, why does the Torah say love your neighbor as yourself and not just love humanity or mankind as yourself? And he said, probably because it's a lot easier to love humanity than it is to love your neighbor. Oh, I love humanity. Birnbaum? Ah, schmuck.
Right.
He said
Right.
it's much harder to love 7 people than it is 7 billion people.
It's like the old joke. It's like we're all it's like the difference between how Gentiles view anti-Semitism and another Jew views anti-Semitism. Like if you ask a Gentile, how do you feel about Jews? The average one, they suck, right? But if you ask them about what about your doctor? He's Jewish. Oh, well, he's okay. He's a good guy. What about your lawyer? He's not too bad, right? In a general sense, they all suck. But as an individual, right? With Jews, it's like the opposite. How do you feel about Jews? Jews. I love Jews. I'm a Jew. We love Jews. But how do you feel about Moshe? The guy you sit next to. He's a schmuck. What about Yaakov? That guy's a prick. I wouldn't want to do business with him. It's like that's how it is. That's like the kind of.
Well, you know what? I very, very briefly led synagogue services on the Moshav that we just moved from. A synagogue that's on the grounds of the school I taught at for about 2 years. And my first week there, we had a class, an in-person class, and then we had services every Friday and everything. It wasn't a daily thing where there were other synagogues in the village that people went to. But after I led my first service and I gave my first Dvar Torah, and dealing with all these different conflicting personalities that conflict not only with me and everybody else there, I sat down to myself and I was like, you know what? If I wasn't Jewish, I would hate Jews.
Right. Right.
These people, of which I am a member, are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, something about us.
Yeah, apparently we're a thorn in the world's ass, too. The way they towards us.
A peculiar bunch. Doing something right, I guess. Keep on trucking as we do, right?
Yeah, I guess we should be really concerned when they all start hugging and loving us.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be decisive there. I know I said that during the hangout. I said at least with Obama, we had we can understand who decide which side to take. But with Trump, it is kind of we're all lovey dovey now. It's like, is that really a good thing? Being too huggy. You know what I mean? Is that in the grand scheme of things, it might not be. It might not actually be a good thing. I don't know. That's just my take anyway. I could be wrong.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to bid you adieu. I got to
hit the hay myself. One
got to work in the morning. Double time. Holiday great.
Excellent hangout. Thank you for having me.
No. Anytime. Next week, I'll figure out a topic for next week, and the next class will be, from here on out, we're going to do Saturday nights, your time.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. God willing.
Okay.
Take care. Have a good night, Rabbi.
Adios.
Adios.